When you look at America's beer history, I mean, we were a country that was literally founded on beer. The Pilgrims landed at Plymouth Rock because they were running low on beer. And so since then, we have been a brewing country.
If you go back and look into American history, there's those wonderful quotes by people like Thomas Jefferson saying, "I wish to see this beverage become more common," and it did. This notion that beer is food, right? That's been a part of the American cuisine since the founding of the country, since the settlement of the country.
When the Germans began coming over in the 1840s, what they brought with them was a whole beer culture. They brought the beer, they brought the beer gardens, they brought the singing and dancing while drinking with your families, in a relaxed situation. By the 1870s, there were well over 1,000 breweries in the United States. By the 1890s, there were about 3,000, and the three biggest breweries in the world were in the United States. At a time when American cities were growing very, very quickly, large numbers of people believed that urban growth was causing all kinds of problems, crime, poverty, so on and so forth. And they kept looking at alcohol as a source of those evils. And if only you could get rid of alcohol, somehow the cities were going to be better.
The high road to national greatness and enduring prosperity does not run through the brewery, the distillery, and the saloon.
Alcohol, the consumption of it, also became wrapped up in the whole issue of immigration. The prohibitionists used German heritage as a way to portray beer makers in the United States as people who were up to no good and who absolutely should be put out of business. And then came a war with Germany, and that's all that was needed to sort of tip it over the edge.
When Prohibition hit for 13 years, it was devastating to the industry. This country that was founded by immigrants and traded off of the traditions from Germany, from the UK, from Belgium, really lost a lot of those great early beer traditions that they had when Prohibition hit. And after Prohibition, the breweries that survived kind of changed their tune a little bit, and they got much, much, much bigger, and the beers that they made sort of became more and more and more narrow.
After Prohibition, it was possible for a big brewer like Miller or Anheuser-Busch, because of trucks and highways, to control much larger areas of distribution than they had before. And it's a capitalist market. The nature of capitalism is that you are in a free market, you're free to pursue profit, and one way to do that, of course, is to break your competitors' kneecaps, and that's what these big brewers proceeded to do.
Open a Budweiser and pour yourself the most inviting glass of beer you've ever tasted.
Sure.
Cold, golden Budweiser with that good taste for good times.
The bulk of the remaining small brewers, that's when they went under, between roughly about 1955 and 1965 or so.
The vast majority of beer in the United States was brewed by a handful of companies, and that number was shrinking. Most analysts who follow the brewing industry in the States actually predicted there might be one or two breweries left by the end of the 20th century. The idea was that, like other industries in post-war America, brewing was just consolidating.
It was down to three breweries, Bud, Coors, and Miller, and a handful of people fighting on the fringe just to barely survive.
Miller introduces light beer. Okay, Anheuser-Busch copies it with Bud Light, which they originally called Budweiser Light. There's Natural Light, there's Busch Light. The light beer sector explodes. It becomes the most popular beer style in the United States, even though it's not really a style.
New Light, everything you always wanted in a beer, and less.
Americans were obsessed with calorie counting. Every beer maker discovered that if they were going to stay in business, they had to keep lightening the beer.
I remember a time when I literally had no access to craft beer. None. I tried every pale lager there was on the market, hoping one of them would actually taste different from all the others, and they never did.
The world had just become this factory, homogenized world. Beer had become that way, food had become that way. It was really stripping the soul out of a country, and a rebellion started.
Well, in 1965, Fritz Maytag bought control of the Anchor Brewery in San Francisco. It was going to go out of business. It was going to be the last craft brewery in the United States. He made it the first. He unwittingly, I think, set the rubric for craft beer that's come afterward. And that rubric is using traditional ingredients to make small batch beer at an independent brewery. From 65 to about 76, Anchor is the only game in town as far as craft brewing in the United States.
In the late 1970s, a guy named Jack McAuliffe opened up a brewery in Sonoma, California. And this changed the game forever. We saw Sierra Nevada rise up and other breweries in California rise up. Breweries in Massachusetts started to open. Jim Cook of Boston Beer started to contract brew off of an old family recipe and grew bigger and bigger and bigger. So many people who got into the industry and who are in it now, they were inspired by those very early beer pioneers to make their own beer, and now they're just taking it and running with it.
Today we're finally at the level of the number of breweries that we had in the 1870s. So we have 2,700 breweries in the U.S. 98% of those breweries are small and independent craft brewers. The beers of today are more flavorful. That is part of this craft beer revolution.
People's palates are changing, especially in America. They're getting tired of the same old bland flavors. It's why a lot of people are turning into foodies pretty much everywhere you go. They're wanting to try new things. They're not wanting chain restaurants. They're wanting a local restaurant, something with interesting, good, fresh food. And when your food tastes change, of course your beer tastes are going to change. You're wanting something with a broad, array of flavors. You can go everywhere from a really light, bready style ale all the way to a really extremely hoppy, really bitter, or really dark, really rich, really chocolatey beer, coffee forward. And you can do this all with the same 4 ingredients, just malt, hops, yeast, and water.
This is the golden age of American craft beer. It's really something. I think we will look back in a half century, and our children and grandchildren will look back in a century or more and see this as a very special time.